Hi, my name is Diane Strickland, and my channel is called Things That Matter. This series that I'm doing is about living together in this pandemic. And I want to share with you some of the things that I think might be able to help you understand yourself, understand others around you, and add some value to getting through this together in the best possible way that we can. My own background includes work in Canada's two largest natural disasters in recovery support. I'm a community and workplace traumatologist. I'm a compassion therapist and a critical incident responder. And I'm also ordained minister for over 3 decades. So I bring all of that stuff to these, and I hope that these will be a few simple ideas that will both inform and help you to be present more effectively in this crisis to yourself and to others. Pandemic Practicums, that's the name of this series. And the first one I want to talk about is sometimes really hard to get a hold of. And it's that everyone's response to a traumatic event is unique. The moment when a crisis becomes real to someone may be really different for each one of us. During this current pandemic, that might have happened in a grocery store aisle when you looked and saw there was nothing on the shelves. It might have been the moment you realized a loved one was out of the country and you didn't know how they were going to get home. Or maybe you picked up a message and were told, don't bother coming into work. Suddenly things get very real. And as time passes with no relief, anxiety builds and our fears increase. But there is some relief we can give ourselves, even as the crisis continues, and there are really simple ways to support other people. And we can learn them, even though we're upset ourselves. We can still learn. So the first one is that everyone's response to a traumatic event is unique. So pandemic creates a context for trauma, and that's going to elicit different reactions. That means some people that you don't expect to be seriously affected may in fact struggle with coming to terms with the facts, the procedures that are in place, and the implications that begin to become apparent. And that may even be you. And while all aspects of a pandemic are important, some do seem to be more obviously critical than others. For example, things about life and death, generally, we agree are more critical. But our anxiety may choose to gather around any aspect at all. And that's because our brains work differently in crisis. We have this wonderful cognitive function going on here that's responsible for language and critical thinking and all those wonderful things. And it does not necessarily dominate brain function in a crisis or a traumatic event. Instead, our alarm systems, which run out of a more primitive part of our brain, the limbic system, amygdala, they may launch a takeover, and their agenda becomes the most important thing. And it may not be triggered by what is truly the most important thing. So that's a fact of life. And the reasons that we are triggered by those things and our alarm system goes off may not always be apparent to even ourselves. And they may not be shared by the person beside us. But they are real, nonetheless. So we may hear suddenly people want to rant about their leadership a lot, or some may be crying in grocery stores. Others are just up all night exhausted, worrying people home. And a few just seem to waltz through it, unaffected by any of it. The point is that we are all different, and our response to trauma is unique, and we are trying to do our best. We may find others with a similar response, but we can't expect them to have it. And there are many known and unknown factors that create our responses. As the crisis goes on, those responses can change on a dime. So be kind to yourself and be kind to others, because a different part of our brain is turned on during situations like this. And we don't always understand why we feel the way we feel. We may also find that in working with other people, their emotions and their behaviors are so different that they catch us right off guard. And it's really unhelpful to try and argue people into being calmer, to correct them about what they're stressed about, or tell them it's really not important, or berate them for wasting energy on that. We are who we are, and our psychological wiring is really complex, and it's all linked to past traumas, and it could be linked to epigenetics as well, which is inherited trauma, DNA, that we can't do anything about. It's just there. Most people are doing the best we can, and our wiring is complex. But in a crisis, self-awareness and can be both scarce and in demand. So don't think that you have to answer people's questions or solve their problem all the time. If you know you can't, or the question is kind of a little bit wackadoodle for you, you don't necessarily need to respond even on topic. If you don't believe it's going to be helpful, there's no value in escalating some discussions. So here's a few low-key responses that I suggest can help harness calm within yourself and possibly within the person you're talking to or others around you who are, our alarms are getting dialed up because they know there's a big fat piece of energy that just come at everybody and they don't know how to respond. And the key is not to respond to the specifics of it. So here's some of the phrases that I have used in my time with this. Well, we are just going to have to keep going and really look out for each other as best as we can. That's the one. 2, you may be onto something there, and I really wish you the best as we all find our way. That's 2. I'm anxious about a lot of things too, and I'm just going to have to take time to sort it all out as we go along. That's number 3. Number 4, it's tough, all right, and it's going to need the best out of all of us. Number 5, these are challenging times. And I often think about my parents and my grandparents and the horrible things that they had to go through in their lives, and they just kept going. And I think that's what they want me to do, so I am. Sometimes you hear a story that's really, really desperate and hard. And a response might be, you have an awful lot to carry right now. May you find the strength to keep going. Or someone who seems to be in such despair they can't think one positive thing. It's very hard right now, and it will get better, but not for a while. Let's push forward as best we can. And if someone, suggests a better way to do everything, which there's lots of that around, you can say, well, you know what? That's a really good point, and I'm going to be thinking about that. So you take care now. The point is that you've heard them, and you have responded with the best that you have, and you have not taken on their problem, taken on their point of view as your own, or tried to argue against it. So those are ways that we can, in fact, manage all the different ways people respond to this crisis, some that we don't understand ourselves. You can keep that list, just jot it down and keep the list by you when you're talking to people electronically, especially if you have to do this for a living. I know a lot of my colleagues in ministry are having to do stuff like this. They have to email people, they're trying to keep in touch, they're phoning people, or they're doing FaceTiming or whatever. And there's a lot of that can come at someone in a position like a religious officer of the church, or role that's important in a religious community. So most of all, don't worry if your response is different from someone else's. Just support that person when they need it with affirming, encouraging presence, if you can be present to them or are every day, or words in other instances. And ask for the same when it's your turn to need it. In other words, what I know is that people want a chance. After they've received something and they feel better, they often want a chance to help someone else. And if we don't give them that chance, especially if we're clergy, if we don't give them the chance to help us, that makes them more anxious, not less anxious. That makes them more anxious. So being able to say, send me a good thought today via text, that's something that people want to do for you. So ask for what you need. And always, if you have any concerns about someone's well-being because you know that they struggle mentally or they have other issues in their home, use local service agencies if they're still running, or call the RCMP or the police and ask for a wellness check on someone. If anyone should ever threaten to harm themselves or others, do not set that side up. Ever call the police, the RCMP, and report it. And that's a kind of a serious way to end, but what I just want us to understand that all the variety of responses are actually all normal. There is no one response that's the right response or one response that's the worst response. We are who we are, we're in this together, and we have to find a way to go, oh, well, that's another way to respond. And also the call to sort of realize what yours is. In my work and in my ministry, I see glimpses of the why of God believing in us. Because sometimes I think, I don't know why God does. But in this particularly difficult work, I see those glimpses. And I think a lot of people in service agencies and in ministry see those glimpses too. So we're going to get there, perhaps diminished in some ways and more in others. This experience is changing us. It's changing us right now. And we can still do this. We can do this. I've seen us do it, and we are doing it right now. And we are not alone. Thanks be to God. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this, and if you think it's helpful, be sure to share it with someone. Just send it around as much as we can, and I'm happy that we can do it together. And certainly, if you want to use the chat underneath, do that. If you want to like or do that. If you don't like the video, just make a note, this is what I hoped it was, or here's a topic I'm looking for. Let me know, and I can file that. And if you want to subscribe, you can. This channel, I'm just sort of getting it going, and it's going to have stuff on it that covers a lot of topics, but nothing I think that's too hard for you, and no heavy duty stuff besides pandemics. Anyway, hang in there and see you next time.